draft week, this day changed all our lives. I shall say.
Yeah, it did. It changed my life last year too.
Yes, it did.
He was physical. He was strong. He was all of above. Had great hands. But nobody ever gave him credit for how smart he was.
Shedeur Sanders' shocking NFL draft fall did not just change his career, it changed Coach Prime's life forever. And if you really remember how that whole draft night felt, you know exactly why people still talk about it like it happened yesterday. Shedeur not going in the first round was already a surprise. Shedeur not going in the second round was beyond surprising. But when he kept sliding through the third and the fourth, that is when it stopped feeling like a normal draft story and started feeling historic. Because we have seen quarterbacks drop before, but a player once viewed as a clear first-round name falling that far, that was unprecedented. That was inconceivable. That was the kind of draft fall that made the whole football world stop and say, wait, what is actually going on here?
Shedeur Sanders not going in the first round? A little bit of a surprise. Shedeur not going in the second round? Incredibly surprising. Not going in the third round?
Unprecedented slide happened.
Not going in the fourth round? Inconceivable.
And here's the part nobody is talking about. The Sanders name was so big that even other quarterbacks waiting to be drafted got pushed out of the conversation. Guys like Quinn Ewers could be sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring, and still all anybody could talk about was Shedeur Sanders. That tells you everything. The entire draft became about his slide, his name, his family, and the way the league handled him. Daniel Jeremiah had him as one of the better players in the class. Other boards had him much higher than where he eventually landed. So when the Cleveland Browns finally got him, it did not just feel like a pick. It felt like the Browns had just stolen value that should never have been available that late.
We all expected Shedeur Sanders to hear his name be called a year from today in the first round. And primetime Deion Sanders just pretty much set the record straight about it actually changed his life.
And that is why Coach Prime's words hit so hard when he said last year's draft changed all their lives. Because for Deion Sanders, this was not just football analysis. This was not just a dad watching a prospect fall. This was personal. This was his son sitting there, waiting, while the whole country watched every round pass by. Imagine being Coach Prime, a Hall of Famer, a legend, a man who built his whole life on confidence and proving people wrong. And now you are watching your son become the biggest story of the draft for all the wrong reasons. That kind of moment does something to you. This is where it gets dangerous, because when a player falls like that, people try to rewrite the whole story overnight. Before the draft, Shedeur was being talked about as a first-round quarterback, one of the biggest names in the class, a guy with accuracy, toughness, production, and star power. Then, once he slides, suddenly everyone acts like they always knew. Suddenly, people start saying he was overrated, he had too much attention, he was never that guy. That is how the draft machine works. It does not just evaluate players, it reshapes narratives after the fact. And Shedeur Sanders became the perfect example of that.
He was physical, he was strong, he was all of above, had great hands, but nobody ever gave him credit for how smart he was.
But the thing about Shedeur Sanders is that he did not let the fall dictate how he carried himself. That is what makes this whole story different. A lot of young quarterbacks would have come out bitter, angry, and desperate to prove everybody wrong in a reckless way. Shedeur handled it with a level of maturity that surprised people. He kept working. He kept his focus. He did not let outside opinions decide how he saw himself. And honestly, that is why so many Browns fans started riding with him even harder. Because when you see somebody get embarrassed publicly and still stand tall, that creates a different kind of connection. Here's the part nobody is talking about. Coach Prime has lived through pressure his entire life, but watching your son live through it is different. Deion could talk all day about his own battles, his own draft experience, his own legendary matchups with Michael Irvin, and all of that is amazing football history. But when he says last year's draft changed his life too, that tells you this one hit him in a place football usually doesn't reach. It was not just pride, it was pain, it was protection. It was knowing that his son was being judged in real time by people who may have already made their minds up before the process even finished.
Browns begin their first round of NFL draft. They have picks number 6 and pick 24. We will definitely see what they do. Whenever they do decide what they're going to do, I will update you guys right here.
And that is why this story still matters now, because the Browns cannot treat Shedeur like some random late-round bonus. They have to understand what they actually got. They got a quarterback who has already been through one of the strangest draft slides we've seen. They got a player with a chip on his shoulder, a name that moves attention, and a fan base already invested in his success. Now the question becomes simple. Are they going to build around him properly, or are they going to waste the value they just stumbled into? This is where young teams usually make a mistake. They draft a quarterback and then act like the hard part is done. It is not. Getting the quarterback is only step one. The next step is protection. The next step is weapons. The next step is making sure he is not running for his life while throwing to receivers who can't separate. If the Browns really believe in Shedeur Sanders, then this draft has to show it. They cannot just say they're building around him. They have to prove it with wide receiver and offensive line help.
That is why Browns fans are watching pick number 6 and pick number 24 so closely, because those picks can tell you everything about the direction of the franchise. If they come out of this with a real wide receiver, a guy like Jordan Tyson or Carnell Tate, someone who can create separation, stretch the defense, and give Shedeur a reliable target, then that says something. That says the Browns understand that a young quarterback needs more than hope. He needs actual playmakers. He needs someone who can win routes and make life easier when the pocket starts closing. But if they go offensive line, especially at left tackle, that also tells you something important. It says they understand the first job is keeping Shedeur upright. Because no quarterback, no matter how accurate, no matter how confident, no matter how smart, can develop correctly if he is constantly under pressure. You cannot build rhythm if the pocket is collapsing every series. You cannot judge a quarterback fairly if he never gets clean looks. So if the Browns address tackle early, that is not boring. That is smart. That is how you protect your investment. Here's the part nobody is talking about. The Browns do not just need one or the other. They need both, wide receiver and offensive line. Because if they only get weapons but cannot block, the weapons do not matter. And if they only block but nobody separates, Shedeur is still stuck holding the ball and taking hits. That is the balance Andrew Berry has to nail. This is not a luxury draft. This is a support the quarterback draft. And if the Browns walk away with both a real receiver and a real offensive lineman, then they are telling the league they are serious about making a run. And honestly, that is why this draft feels bigger than normal. Because last year, Andrew Berry did a solid job, and now fans expect him to stack another good draft on top of it. But this one has a different weight. This one is tied directly to Shedeur's future. This one is tied to whether the Browns can turn the most shocking value pick of the previous draft into a real franchise plan. If they draft the right way, people will look back and say the slide changed everything in Cleveland's favor. If they mess this up, people will say they had a gift and did not know what to do with it. This is where it gets dangerous, because the NFL loves punishing teams that do not protect young quarterbacks. The league is too fast, the pass rushers are too good, defensive coordinators are too smart. If you put a young quarterback out there without enough help, you are not developing him, you are damaging him. And Shedeur already went through enough just getting into the league. The Browns cannot make the mistake of letting the draft fall be only the first part of the struggle. They have to make it the beginning of the comeback story. And that is where Coach Prime's whole football life connects to this. Deion knows what it means to be doubted. He knows what it means to have people waiting for you to fail. He knows what it means to carry a name, carry pressure, and still show up. When he talks about Michael Irvin, when he talks about how smart and physical and competitive those battles were, he's really talking about what separates great players.
It is not just talent, it is awareness, it is toughness. It is the ability to adjust when somebody across from you knows exactly what you want to do. That is the kind of football IQ Shedeur has grown up around his whole life. Coach Prime and Michael Irvin talking about those old matchups was not just nostalgia, it was a reminder of how serious football becomes at the highest level. Deion talked about how Irvin was not just strong and physical, but smart. He knew how to set defenders up, he knew how to use leverage, he knew how to make elite athletes hesitate. And that matters because Shedeur has been raised in that football laboratory. He has heard those stories, he has been around that level of detail. So when people act like he doesn't know the game or cannot learn, it sounds ridiculous. Here's the part nobody is talking about. Shedeur is not just carrying a famous last name, he is carrying football education that most prospects could never get. He grew up around legends talking about releases, leverage, timing, footwork, disguise, pressure, and competition. That doesn't guarantee NFL success, but it absolutely matters. It means he understands the game through a different lens. And that is why the Browns should be doing everything possible to build a real structure around him, instead of treating him like a lottery ticket. And yes, people can keep debating whether teams colluded, whether they overthought the personality, whether the league scared front offices, or whether the league just got it wrong. That debate is not going away. But the Browns cannot live in that debate. They have to live in the opportunity. Whatever happened on draft night happened. The question now is what Cleveland does with the player it landed. Because sometimes the league makes a mistake and one team benefits. That is only valuable if that team actually capitalizes. This is where young quarterbacks usually make a mistake. They try to prove every team wrong by doing too much too fast. Shedeur doesn't need to do that. He needs to grow inside a real plan. He needs to trust the structure, trust the protection, trust his weapons, and let the game come to him. But for that to happen, the Browns have to meet him halfway. They have to give him a clean enough pocket. They have to give him targets who make defenses pay. They have to give him a coaching staff that communicates clearly and lets him play with confidence. If they use pick 6 on a receiver, I get it. If they use pick 6 on a left tackle, I get it. If they find a way to come out of the first round with both receiver and offensive line help, then that's the dream scenario. That is when Browns fans should get hyped, because that wouldn't just be drafting good players, that would be making a statement. It would be saying, we know what we have in Shedeur, and we are not going to let him fail because of poor support. So now the debate is simple. Did the NFL expose Shedeur Sanders on draft night, or did the league expose itself by letting a first-round level quarterback fall into Cleveland's lap? And more importantly, are the Browns smart enough to finish the job by drafting a real wide receiver and a real offensive lineman around him? Because if they do, that draft fall will not be remembered as the night Shedeur lost. It will be remembered as the night the Browns won.